Welcome to a demo on how to use Java business objects, or just normal Java classes rather, inside of an Android activity. Now this isn't anything particularly new and special, it's just that sometimes when working with the Android framework, it's a little easy to get caught up in just the Android world and forget that you're backed by the entire Java world. So here I'm going to show how to create a very simple custom class, and we're going to then use that through a Java or an Android activity. So showing at the moment, I've got a UML diagram, creating a program called Violet UML, and it's a very simple kind of diagram of what's going on. So over here we've got our main activity. This is the usual Android activity class that is created when we're working with an activity. And so here I'm listing that it is the UI components. So this is where we make our buttons, this is where we connect a button up to have it change text on a text view and that kind of thing. Now of course, main activity inherits from activity, which inherits from a lot of other things inside the Android framework, and this is from the Android SDK. So this provides us all of the background for our activity to actually function. Now, this is what we've normally seen so far. The new thing that we're introducing in this tutorial is the fact that we can create our own class. So I'm going to create a PetRock. And my main activity is going to have a PetRock. So it's going to instantiate, or one-way dependency on, so creating a PetRock. And so here, I'm just putting a comment in. This is going to be what we might call the business logic, or just a normal Java class. Don't get caught up on the word business. It's not like we're just sticking with business things here. But we talk about business logic as in anything that's required to be the logic of our program that maybe isn't connected with the UI directly or something like that. So we're going to implement some business logic, being our PetRock is going to be the business of this application, and we're going to set up a UI to use that PetRock in a very simple way. Another thing that's going to be covered is we're going to look through enums and a brief tour of how to use them. Okay, so let's carry on. I've already created a project here. I'm calling it business objects just as a demo on what to do with them. And we can see here it's the standard Java project that comes up by default. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get a bit more screen space here, so I'm going to minimize all of that stuff at the bottom. It's gone here onto the right. I can get it back anytime I like. I just want more screen space to work with this demo. So let's go and start this off. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to create my PetRock. So I'm going to go here into my package that I've expanded. If I double click on this, it's just my standard activity. I want to right click, new, and I'm going to say class. I give it let me pull that down a little. I give it a name, so I'm going to call this PetRock. And I don't want to inherit from anything other than just straight old good old object. And I don't need to have a main. So click finish. And now this is just a simple Java class. I can write a Java doc for it. So manage the state for a PetRock. Now, what is my PetRock going to do? Well, this particular PetRock has emotion. So what we're going to do is we're going to give it one emotion of either tired, happy, or sad. Now a good way to do this is because we've got a discrete list of options that are preset, is I'm going to use an enum for this purpose. So I'm going to say I want a enum, let's call it emotion, and I need to give it some options. So between these curly braces, I'm going to give it whatever emotions I want. So let's give it tired, happy, and sad. Now you note I put the actual enums in uppercase and the type, emotion, looking like it's a class. So my type looks with a capital E, but all of the options are effectively constants, so I'm going to capitalize those. Now I need to give it some visibility. I can leave it as it stands. It'll be package visibility. I want to switch this to public just to force it to be visible from outside, because I'm going to be returning and passing in these emotions. Now, of course, my PetRock actually has to have an emotion, so I'm going to say a private, and I'm going to instantiate this emotion. So then I say emotion is what I want to have. I'm going to call it currentEmotion, and I'm going to initialize it to some value. Now the way I do that is I say emotion dot, and then I pick the value. And let's say that my PetRock starts off tired. This is going to be a really, really simple Java object. So I'm going to create a getter and a setter, or a accessor and a mutator for this particular property so that I can change it and read it from outside. I could type that manually, although there's an easier way. So I'm going to right click, I'll do that up here, right click my project, or my file, and then go down to source, and then there is a generate getters and setters. Unfortunately, it's a little off the screen at the moment. So now we've got the option here through Eclipse to generate getters and setters. I will select them all. It's going to give me that, and it's going to make them public, which sounds good to me. And so now I have my getter and my setter for my currentEmotion. getCurrentEmotion, it returns it. setCurrentEmotion, it brings in the currentEmotion and changes it. Which is exactly what I wanted. Now the final thing is I want to implement the toString. I can type it out. I'll demonstrate how to do it with Eclipse. I'm going to go to source, and I'm going to override implemented methods. Again, it's unfortunately slightly off the screen. I can pull it up other way by going Alt-Shift-S, brings up that little submenu, and I'm just going to go and override or implement methods. This allows me to override methods in the base class. I'm inheriting from object because you always have to inherit from something. And I'm going to override toString. So now I've got a toString method here. I like to put it at the bottom, so I'll cut this, go down to the bottom of my file, and paste it in here. Now, I don't want to call the super, I don't want to do anything. Oh, what I want to do is I want to print out some message. So I'm going to return the string, I'm feeling. Now I need to put in here the emotion. As it turns out, I can simply say currentEmotion and dot toString. Control, oops. I'll select the currently one there. So I'm feeling that. And let's add a period at the end just to make it complete. So currentEmotion is my enum. It has a toString on it, and what it will do is if, for example, I'm tired, it'll actually return the string in quotes tired, all uppercase. Excuse me. So what I now want to do is I want to actually use this. So now I've got my class. I'm going to go back here to my activity, and I'm going to do something with it. Well, again, I don't need the options menu for this example, so I'll get rid of it. I need to create a PetRock. I want one here in my activity, so I'll put it here as a field of my class. So I'm going to say it is private, my PetRock, and let's call him Rocky. I'm going to give him I need to create one, so I'm going to say equals a new PetRock, and that actually instantiates a new PetRock for me, which I can now use throughout my activity. So now let's go and we got to figure out what we're going to do with this. So I'm going to go back here to my UI, and let's start laying some things out on the UI. I'm going to zoom in so we can actually see what we're doing. So let's display, for example, what it's feeling like. I'll create a new text field underneath here. And let's go up here, instead of hello world, I'm going to change the text to be let's say Rocky says, and then in the second one is where we're actually going to put what Rocky's saying. Now I don't know what that is off at design time. That's going to be a runtime decision. So I'm going to change the ID here. Instead of text view, I'll call it txt for text, and then let's say Rocky feeling. So that just gives it an ID that we can then pull up later. I don't need to change the text at the moment because I'll do that at runtime. I'm going to drop in two buttons, one on the top left, one on the top right. Go back over here. Got to give it a name because I need to access it through Java. So button, and let's say happy. Click back into it to make sure I got the right one selected. And then text, instead of just button, say make happy. We'll make Rocky feel happy. Create another one here. Button sad. Select it again, and make sad. So I got my two buttons and some text that I can use. I'll save this so that the R file gets automatically generated. Come back in here. Now what do I want to do? Well, effectively, I want to have the buttons. I want to set up the buttons to actually change Rocky's state. So I'm going to create a method called setUpHappyButton. Go Control 1. It brings up the options here. I then want to create a method, and now I can implement this. This keeps my code nice and modular. So we've seen before how to work with a button, so I need to get a button. I'll call it button equals. I got to cast the result coming back from the view, so it's going to be find view by ID. I'm going to say r.id and then whatever button I want. So this is going to be the happy button, so I'll go happy. I now need to set up the onClickListener, so I'm going to say button dot set onClickListener. Take that. I want a new view dot onClickListener. Hit enter and it auto completes the anonymous class for me. Now inside of it, what do I want to do? Well, all I really want to do is I want to change whatever Rocky is saying. So I can say Rocky dot set currentEmotion, and the current emotion is going to be emotion dot happy. Make Rocky happy. Okay, so what are we doing? We're going to call at createTime. We call the function setUpHappyButton. setUpHappyButton finds the button I'm working with. It registers an onClickListener. So this piece of code is going to execute every time the user clicks that button. And all we're going to do is tell Rocky to become happy. Now if I were to run this, and in fact I can do that right now, we're not going to see anything happen. Why? Well, we have not yet hooked Rocky's status into anything. Sure, Rocky's now happy, but we haven't actually updated the text here. So let's do that. Now how do I want to do that? A reasonable idea is to create an updateUI method. So I can do that in a few ways. I'll just have Eclipse automatically generate one for me. So I'm going to call it here updateUI. Note that I'm calling it here in onCreate, which is actually a good idea because once I've created Rocky and set up my UI, I probably want to update it with the appropriate information. Now it puts it immediately afterwards. I want to keep these in order, so I'm going to move it down here to the bottom. I like the ordering to be correct. So it's the same sort of process as before. I need a text view. I'll call it text. Let's call it text view. Is equal to, I need to do a cast of it to a text view. If you can't remember, if you don't know what type you're working with, you can go back here to your activity. You can click on something, like we'll take this text view here, and it tells me up here that this is a text view in brackets. The other ones we see are buttons. This one here we can see it is a text view. It should tell us right here, text view. So we know what we're working with, or we can go into the XML directly and see it's a text view. Here we got a button that'll help us figure out what kind of class we're working on. So I'm going to find view by ID, and I want to do r.id. And this is the text, not text view 2, text Rocky feeling. How does Rocky feel today? I'll go Control 1, import the text view so that I get rid of that compile warning, or error, pardon me. Now what I need to do is I need to do something with it. So every time I call updateUI, I want to make sure that this particular text view is displaying the correct feeling from Rocky. So I can do this in a couple steps just to break it out. I can say feeling here is equal to, well, this is whatever Rocky is feeling. Pardon me, Rocky is lowercase, because it's a variable, Rocky dot, and here's all the options we've got. I'm just going to go with toString, and that will convert Rocky's feeling into a string. That's calling the built-in function that we have set up before. Now it's simply a matter of setting the text, so I can say text view dot set text, and I want it to be feeling. Okay, so now when I run the program, it's going to update the UI at startup, but we don't do anything when I click the button. So when the application relaunches, we will at startup see that Rocky is feeling tired. But when I click the button, we don't see anything happen yet. So let's go back and fix that up. All I need to do here is called updateUI. save, relaunch. Tired, happy. That's fantastic. But of course we've not yet implemented the sad functionality. Let's go do that. Well, we've already got this code here, so my first stab at it will be to copy and paste. So I will copy and paste this code. Now a heads up, anytime you use copy and paste, think to yourself, I'm probably going down the wrong path. But let's just follow it through. So I want to become sad. I want to make sure that I update all of this stuff. So this is the sad button. I want to set the OnClickListener. I want to change the emotion to sad. And then I want to update the UI. And one final thing, I need to actually call it from up here. So what I did is I just copy and pasted my happy button, and I created a new one here for sad, updating the appropriate fields. Now, with any luck, I got all the fields correctly. Let's run this. So Control F11, switching back to my emulator. We should now have both buttons and the UI update at startup. So tired, sad, happy, sad. Click it a few times, does nothing, and it switches back and forth. That's fantastic. But we're not done yet. We still have an opportunity to improve our code. We can note that these two functions are very, very, very similar. So why don't I try and make them one function? Rather than having two places, I got twice as many bugs, I can just do it in one spot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this. I'm going to make a third function. And I'm going to say, instead of set up happy or sad, I'm going to say set up emotion button. That's a bit more generic. Now, what did I need to change? Well, we note here that I needed an emotion, and I needed to know which button to work on. So let's pass those in. Int button ID and emotion, new emotion. So these are the two things that I needed to customize. So instead of me calling r.id.buttonHappy, I'll just use the button ID, which happens to be an integer. We can find out it's an integer by going to the generated file, r. We can look in here, and we see that all of these IDs are in fact integers. Okay, so that was the ID. The emotion, well, that's what I'm creating. So new emotion, I'll copy that. And in here, simply want to use this. Now it turns out it's got a compile error here. If I mouse over it, it says cannot refer to non-final variable emotion inside of an inner class. So effectively, the problem is that this comes in and it's non-final, meaning we could change what this refers to. We could change this to point to a different emotion. Well, we're not actually going to do that, and so we can make this whole thing work, in fact, by just putting final in front of this. This isn't something you normally have to do, but because I'm using it inside of an inner class, there are special restrictions on what type of variables you can use inside of it. Sometimes it can be a little tricky to figure out because this is effectively a complete new class inside of it. So now I've got my new function here. I can change my old ones to actually just call this. So I can set an emotion button. I can do r.id.buttonHappy, and I can pass it in the emotion happy. So that does my happy button. I can duplicate it by going Control-Alt down on the line, and now I can just change this to say button. Well, this is the sad button, and the emotion is going to be sad. And I can delete that. Now, the magical thing is, I can delete code. I've got the same functionality, I just have less code to maintain. I'll run that, saving the file. Coming back over here, we should see no difference. So this was an example of a refactoring. I just cleaned up my code. I didn't actually change the functionality. So we start off feeling tired, sad still works, and happy works. That's just fantastic. That is precisely what we wanted. So what have we seen? Well, to begin with, we started off with an idea for a class diagram. We started off with the idea of making a main activity, that's our UI. We're going to have it instantiate a PetRock, which is something that we created. This is the business logic. Nothing to do with real business here, unless we're going to sell our PetRock. We're just coming up with a Java object to implement part of our functionality. We can look at our PetRock that we started by implementing. So we have here the emotions that we want to work with. We have here the initial emotion, so I instantiate a field inside, or create a field inside of my object or my class to represent the current emotion. And then I've got some accessors and mutators for allowing me to change and read the status of it. And I implemented and overrode the toString function so that I could do a printout, getting a listing of what it currently feels. It's not a bad idea to let your objects format themselves in this kind of case, if it's got a standardized format you can use. Back in my activity, I created a couple buttons, and I populated them with some code so that I could actually call back and change the state of my object, and then update it. And we can see here, if I double click on Rocky, we're using Rocky in a few different places. I can use it inside of a button callback, I can use it inside of my own functions, and I can use it inside functions anywhere inside of this object, this class. So this is a really powerful way to separate out your logic. I could have rolled all of the functionality of my PetRock into my main activity here, but that would really confound my UI with my business logic. I want to keep those as separate as possible so that my UI stays that much clearer. And then you'll note that I refactored to clean up the code to make it work. And so at the end of the day, we ended up with a rock that we could make happy or sad and display it on the UI. Thank you for watching.